Are you the type of person that enjoys being large and in charge? The type of person that enjoys leading a team towards a collective goal and being able to make pivotal decisions in a matter of moments that completely change the entire tide of battle? The type of person that's okay with not getting the celebratory screen at the end of the game, but knowing that you still did your best and that a win means more than being on top of the leaderboard? Well, sit down, shut up, and throw all of that utter garbage out of your brain, because the only thing that actually matters around here is huge, strong muscles, the mental capacity of your nearest toaster, and a strange desire to get hit by both big, strong men and women because it kinda makes you a little excited.
What do you mean by that?
Welcome to A Terrible Guide to Marvel Rivals. Tank, or Vanguard if you enjoy eating dirt, is the beefy role inside of Marvel Rivals, filled with the highest health pools, the most amount of crowd control, and stretching and squashing the proportions of the characters so much that they look like your average TikTok influencer. It is also the role that, unfortunately, if you're anything like me, you'll be playing about 90% of the time as a flex player because just like in any other game where you have the standard tank, DPS, and healer triangle, it's considered the most unfun role that's still more important than the other two combined. Yet despite that importance, no one wants to play it, and at this point, I don't think it'll matter how many muscle mommies NetEads add to the role, people just don't want to tank. But you're not like those weak peasants who are scared of taking 20 punches to the face and considering your life choices while 5 children scream in your ear about being dove. Yes, I said 5 and not 4 because you're probably solo tanking, and you're not like those bubble blowing babies who can't stand a little taking responsibility in their video games. You're here because you saw what the role had to offer, including the solo tanking, and said, you know what? I refuse to be like those weak little bitches who only play DPS and support. I'm gonna step into a real role. And also probably the muscle mommies, let's not kid ourselves about that too much. Before we get too far into the fundamentals of what makes a good tank player outside of just picking a character in the role and having hand-eye coordination that's on par with your average 5-year-old, we need to know the difference between the types of tanks that you can play as. Marvel Rivals has a couple different types of tanks, each one playing differently and also determining how much fun you're allowed to have. You have your standard frontline shield tanks whose job it is to absorb as much damage as possible through shields, damage resist, and basically being that one kid on the playground who you totally tagged and they go, "Nuh-uh, you didn't get me," even though you basically slapped them in the face. You have brawling tanks who are usually melee and love to say, I paid for the whole health bar, so I'm gonna use the whole health bar, which is a weird thing to say considering this is a free-to-play game, and who give their healers a heart attack from how much their health bar rubber bands. You have dive tanks whose job it is to either annoy the backline so much that the enemy tanks have to turn around from their healers, whining and get shot in the back, or whose team doesn't turn around from the constant whining and then go into all chat and complain about the mysterious lack of heals. You have the ever annoying control tanks who effectively can either make an entire area into a giant middle finger for the enemy team that they can't really walk past, or are the giant middle fingers that can completely cut off teammates from line of sight. And finally, you have Hulk. Wait, just Hulk? Wait a minute, what, am I reading this correctly? Yeah, it literally just says Hulk. I knew he was bad, but I didn't think he would even get a category. Anyways, throw all of this information out of your head because 90% of the time you're probably just going to be solo tanking on Magneto. 3 DPS, 2 healers, solo tank Magneto because no one else can take a second to be responsible and let you have a little fun on one of the other tanks. But hey, at least you get to throw your giant meaty balls at the enemy support players, so that makes up for it. Kinda. And being a tank, especially the solo tank that you'll be, is all about knowing the power of presence. Because you, as the giant walking meat shield of the game, have an incredibly important role that is incredibly hard to describe because it's not really a mechanic in the game as much as it is your ability to produce a vibe. Unlike pressing your abilities or left-clicking on people's heads, your ability to be a constant presence that the enemy team has to account for is something that is entirely based on things that are not measured on the scoreboard. How many kills you straight up deny through your shields, the amount of time you spend on the payload to make sure it doesn't move while your DPS and heals are a mile away from it, holding your ultimate for the correct moment so you don't get cucked out of it or lose value from it even if you get no kills, and how many times you can get back up like you're an anime protagonist whose friends are all cheering for you, but instead those cheers are replaced by 5 chuds who all think they can do your job better than you but somehow refuse to swap. And just like probably about 90% of the scripts that I write for these videos, most of the complaints that you'll receive as a tank are going to be completely incoherent. But that doesn't matter, because if you're able to master the ability of having presence as a tank, then you'll honestly be aura farming harder than about 90% of said anime protagonists. Yes, Piccolo, we see the fit. And this is also why you can't be a coward when you're playing tank, because if you're so afraid of taking damage that you never approach the point to even attempt contesting it, then the enemy team is either going to get a free push of the cart or free capture progress on the point. And if you're whimpering in the backline begging for your healers to fix the 5 damage that you just took, then no one on your team is able to properly step up, and it's all your fault for being such a weak-willed little bitch. This is why I believe that tanks in Marvel Rivals have such a bigger influence over how the game goes than the other 2 roles combined. Because if you're not actively making yourself into a threat that the enemy team has to respect, then you're just playing wrong. Your healers need someone to keep pressure away from them so they can properly heal, and your DPS need pressure away from them so they can properly deal out their damage. And in a PvP game, there's not a taunt button that can direct all of the enemy's attention directly to you, like you just released that really embarrassing yearbook photo that they hoped everyone would have forgotten about already, so you need to be the one making yourself look like a nice juicy steak. This is why the tank role has the highest amount of shields, crowd control, and area denial abilities, because you need to use them in order to have the enemy team either take their focus away from your squishy teammates and get it onto you, or force them to shoot at things that end up taking their damage away from hitting anyone else. I mean, imagine playing a game of Groot where no one shoots your walls. I know it's not that hard to imagine considering that's most Groot games, but stick with me here. If there's no damage being dealt to your walls, you're completely able to cut off most tanks from being able to be in line of sight of their healers. Most of them will either have to use long movement cooldowns, their entire damage reduction lineup, or try their best to walk around the side of the wall and get back into line of sight to even have a chance at survival. But on the opposite side, if you're playing a game of Groot where your walls are getting focused down almost instantly, you're still providing some value because the enemy team has to waste time shooting something that won't give them any ult charge value. In either situation, you are a problem that the enemy team has to solve. And if they're anything like me, where I forget all of the information I just learned the second the tests for it is over, they're gonna have a hard time figuring it out. And just like 90% of this insane rant about how to play fictional characters in a game that was designed around children playing it before they realized that the gooners like the models a little bit too much, playing tank is a lot about just hitting your head against the wall until something good happens. I understand that a lot of people have anxiety when it comes to tanking because they realize that it takes a lot more personal responsibility to play tanks in this game than the other roles, and the value you provide isn't always obvious because you can take the most damage in the game and still lose because taking damage does not equal being a good tank. But Marvel Rivals is just like real life, not in the sense of being a fantastical hero that goes on awesome adventures with high-octane fights, but that the only way you can start being good at something is to actually just do the thing, regardless of how scared or frightened you may be. Remember, someone who's currently playing the guitar up on stage in front of hundreds of people was also once the person whose parents couldn't stand the sound it made while their hands fumbled across the strings like wet noodles. So get out there and just pick a tank, because you will get better at it, and we are in enough of a tank shortage as it is. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? I hope you enjoyed this terrible guide to tanks and Marvel Rivals. If you did, then go tell me in the comments below whether you want to see Duelist or Strategist next, and while you're down there, go hit that subscribe button to be updated whenever any of my new videos come out. Bye bye!